Medical affairs team currently in the process of evaluating AI vendors or consultancies to help enable either efficiency or impact in some of your core processes. Well, here's a couple of things that you should consider as you go into that process, including thoughts from a technical lens for what to potentially watch out for that you might not even be aware of. So item number one, the first thing that I recommend anyone and every team do is list out the problems you're trying to address, prioritize them, and understand which problems will create the most business impact if you were to address that problem. Once you have that problem or that process that you'd like to automate, I would break that down and define the absolute core criteria that a vendor must solve. Otherwise, they're just not a good fit. What this helps do is it makes the evaluation process so much easier, because when you go into those vendor conversations, you're going in there with already a very defined problem, a very defined set of criteria, and you can easily evaluate no matter what amount of features a vendor might have, whether they actually address your core needs. So number two, the reason why also defining the core problems makes the process a lot easier is because what oftentimes can happen in the process of evaluating vendors is you jump on a call, you get a list of features, you get a demo, some things end up being cool and you're like, oh, I really like this feature from one vendor, I like this feature from another vendor, and you kind of walk away, you've evaluated 5, 10, 20, 30 vendors, and now you have this kind of hodgepodge of features, and it can be a bit overwhelming to then understand who is actually a good fit. And sometimes it could be the case that none of them are a good fit, but if you've defined that core criteria, it just makes that process so much easier. And you might not even have to evaluate 30 plus vendors because you can be very direct in those initial conversations. And even myself as a vendor, if a medical affairs team comes to me and they're like, hey, this is what we want to automate, these are kind of core needs from our perspective, are you able to do that, yes or no? It makes my job a lot easier. If we can do that, great, then I'll tell you. If we can't, then we can't, and that's fine. And then maybe we can think of other vendors or other potential ideas that can actually address your problem. So I think that's probably the most important thing, to really lay out that foundation. And let's say you already have, and you have vendors that you're currently in the process of considering that fit that core criteria. The second item, and the couple of things to consider from the technical side of the spectrum, is one, I would ask them what type of AI models are they using. They could be using standard NLP models, machine learning models. Those have been around for a while. When it comes to using large language models, I would encourage asking what type of models are they using? Are they using OpenAI, ChatGPT type of models, or are they using open source models? And the reason why that could be important for your team to consider depends on a couple of things, especially when it comes to compliance and security, right? Oftentimes OpenAI can be a black box, and most companies can have their own enterprise subscriptions to it. Maybe there's ways you can leverage that in the process. With OSS models or open source models, oftentimes those are fully transparent, and when vendors use them, they're likely fine-tuning or training them in-house. And there's also capabilities with those types of models to be able to be deployed on your own premises. So there's a lot more control over the data flow, over the way the data ends up being processed when it comes to open source models, as well as, I would argue, customization, depending on what your use case and application is. Another question I would ask, depending on how important privacy and compliance is to you, is do they have capabilities to deploy on premises, which means deploying on your company's own internal data servers and internal infrastructure. Depending on what use case you're solving, that might be a core priority for you. Some vendors only offer cloud-based solutions, while others can also offer full on-prem deployments, which then are fully in the walls and confinements of your organization. So that's another criteria potentially to consider. The other consideration, obviously, is when it comes to your data. If you were to work with a vendor and they personalize models for you, what happens with the data that you share with them? If they're training models on your data, do you own the byproduct model that has been trained for your data? Is your data used in any way, shape, or form, whether in a anonymized or aggregate manner, to support some of their general models, etc.? etc. But it's important later down in conversations to make sure to clarify that, so that way you have full comfort and confidence and transparency around how that data is being utilized. And then the other consideration, and the last one I'll mention, because I also see this pattern happen often with evaluating vendors, and this ties back to the first point, which is in defining your core problems. Sometimes when you're assessing different vendors, there is a level of customization that may be required for your needs. So with a given vendor solution, how much space is there for the level of customization that you're looking for? Whether it is personalizing certain models or whether it is personalizing certain features. Today with Viva CRM, for example, you can get Viva CRM and then you can hire folks to customize on top of Viva CRM to build flows in, right, that are very specific to your team. So depending on your use case and the problem that you're trying to address, some vendors will be able to offer a level of customization while some might not. So before you go into a contract with a vendor or decide to pick one, depending on how important that is to you, I would definitely make sure to dig into that and get an understanding if they're offering a software solution or a license, to what level is customization available to solve your problems. Some vendors just offer a standard product. There is no customization, so they might not be a fit. And I think that is ultimately a good thing to know upfront. So best of luck in finding the right vendors for you. But if you take away any one thing from this conversation, is define your core problems first, break it problems if a vendor can't solve it, and then go into the evaluation process with that hat on. And if at the end you found no vendors, that is perhaps a good consideration for when to prioritize resourcing in-house to build something just for your company and your team.